Royal Exclusive is launching our first live show and you can be part of the audience. Join me at our HQ in the heart of London to put your questions to legendary Sun Royal photographer Arthur Edwards and former BBC Royal correspondent Jenny Bond. Head to the link in the description below for tickets.
The reality is, obviously, there are a number of people that dislike her and are leaking quite heavily. I mean, there must be a little bit of truth in that there's been difficulty. We know that from what happened when she was working and based over here.
He was a man that actually began to realise, hang on, this is my fault. If I'm found in any way to be responsible for this, where does that put me? Hang on a minute, it can't be that bad living in the size mansion they do. And they've still got quite a bit of cash to make life worth living. So it isn't that bad a story. So I haven't got a great deal of sympathy for him.
Hello and welcome to Royal Exclusive. I'm Matt Wilkinson, the Sun's Royal Editor. With me in the studio today is Ken Wharf, former protection officer to Princes William and Harry and the late Princess Diana, and royal author Rob Jobson. We have a lot to discuss today, so let's jump straight in. Have you seen what's been going on in the US media in the last couple of weeks? First of all, we had the Hollywood Reporter, a well-respected magazine in Los Angeles, that they had sources, they say 12 sources, one of them was very high up in the Sussexes organisation, saying that they call Meghan Duchess difficult and a dictator in high heels. Now, we were on the show last week and we discussed this, and Archwell had come back and said, these quotes are all fabricated, this is all nonsense, no one says this about her. Then this week, in Us Weekly, named members of staff have come out in support of Meghan. This has then led to the Daily Beast, another US publication, coming back with more aides calling her a demon and recalling psycho moments of when she was working at the palace. As I started this, the Queen's mantra, never complain, never explain. Well, what's going on here in the US media? Well, they're all turning on her now in the same way that was possibly happening in the UK when she was here.
The reality is, obviously, there are a number of people that dislike her and are leaking quite heavily against her, and this whole business of this named members of staff, it does seem to me that it's like they protest too much. I mean, there must be a little bit of truth in that there's been difficulty. We know that happened from what happened when she was working and based over here. So look,
it's eerily familiar, isn't it, to what was happening?
Similar, and there's been a lot of changeover, as I wrote in The Sun not long ago. There's been a number of turnover of staff. But, I think that she does get probably a bad press all the time. It's easy. She's an easy shot, I think. And I think that this is probably what's happened here, is that they've decided to put out these series of statements to change the narrative, because that's what their PR people will say. You've got to change the narrative. It won't change the narrative.
Harry's been in New York this week, alone, again, worth pointing out. He's not travelled with Meghan. He's travelling back to the UK this weekend. We believe not without Meghan. At a Halo Trust event, obviously that was something that Diana was really into. He said that he was carrying on Diana's legacy is something he takes very seriously. Knowing what you know about Harry and Diana and the years you spent with them, is he right? Is he successfully carrying on Diana's legacy in everything he's doing?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that the one thing that Harry's spoken about often is his mother and the impact and the way that she carried out her work, even after she'd abandoned almost entirely her own charities and her work. I mean, the two remaining charities that she hung on to was certainly the work with the British Red Cross that encompassed, the landmines in Mozambique, and which now Harry himself has picked up where Diana left off, because he passionately believed in his mother. His mother was so influential in his life, as and indeed, William would say the same. And I don't think, even now, 25, 26, 27 years after Diana's death, both her children are talking about the work that she did. And I, for one, would never have thought that so long after her death, we would still be talking about Princess Diana. But, I think this is what Harry wants to do. I mean, it will never fade in his view. It's a shame that this is not seen as a combined effort with his wife, Meghan. But, the rumours that surround that are endless. But he wants to continue. He believes that he has a part to play in protecting and working for the British monarchy, even though he may be resident in Montecito in America now. But it's always been my belief that at some point that he will come back, because I think it's too big a post for him to say goodbye to. We know we've had the debates about his security, and I think that is still ongoing. But no one's denied him of security in this country, because the government, the police, have a responsibility to look after him when he comes here. Unfortunately, it's not quite what he wants. He wanted the full protection package of 5 or 6 people employed by Royal Protection, but he doesn't live here anymore.
That may be why Meghan's not coming. It's this ongoing thing. He will get a degree of security, not the security he wants, but she won't.
Well, he said that without security, he doesn't feel it's safe to return with Meghan. That's.
Well, I mean, obviously she feels unsafe, and that should be taken into consideration. Personally, I think if he's coming, he should be allowed to travel with his wife. I mean, they should both be protected, but because I think that the level of fallout from it would be ridiculous. And I mean, can you imagine the stories and can you imagine the finger pointing? You know, we had years ago when Earl Mountbatten was murdered by the IRA. You know, he didn't. He was seen as a, quotes, legitimate target of terrorists.
Well,
and in my opinion, Harry will be seen the same as a legitimate target.
Well, I disagree slightly with that, Bob, in the sense that because he is still living in America, he's still a prince of the realm. And, you know, were he to come back with his wife, Meghan, and his children, there's no doubt in my mind that the right protection package would be afforded to him. At the moment,
not for her.
Well, no,
he said it very clearly.
No, that's not true. But
that's what he's arguing.
She would be part of a protection package that the government would make sure, because they would not want.
That's not what he's been told. That's why he's going to court.
Well, I'm not so certain about that. What I do know is that were she to appear with him in the United Kingdom, the right security package will be afforded to him.
To him as a prince of the realm.
To him and
they're
Meghan.
No longer HRA. She's no longer a working royal. Therefore, the reason he would get it is different to, as a prince.
I'm disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is,
I don't
whatever
think
is
that's
said,
what he's arguing for.
Yes, but look, let's put it to the test. At the moment, she has not come back. For 2 or 3 years.
I know, but that's put it to the test. But the point
British government and the Metropolitan Police would not want this security package to fail.
That's exactly what the court case is about.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying is that they would give him protection.
It
would
yes.
not, and her, but it would not be what he wants.
Rob, do we think do we think the reason why he's travelling a lot on his own or coming back to the UK 4 times on his own is that only to do with security?
No, but it's part of it, and it's part of the fact that he's got this ongoing case. That's the point. He's making a point. But look, I think Kenny's right in saying that he wants to come back and would want to do more things over here if he could. The reality is that was the package he put together before Brexit. That's exactly what he wanted to do. Private things that he's doing, making money, plus the things that he wants to do over here. Now, the problem you've got with Harry is a lot of the whispers in the corridor is they still worry what happens when the money runs out. Well, he made an awful lot of money from his book Spare, so maybe that's a while away yet. And also, you still got the 2 main issues here of the Queen, Camilla, and Prince William that really have not made up after Spare with Harry. The King, it's always going to be more difficult for the King as it's his son. And, you know, he was very, very close to Harry, probably closer to Harry than he was to William before all this happened. And, you know, he probably deep down wants to develop that relationship again. But when you've got his two main, if you like, his Praetorian Guard of William and Camilla at odds with Harry, it's going to be more difficult for that to happen.
This will be the 4th time, Ken, that he's come over this year that we know about. I mean, when we went to his uncle Lord Fellowes' funeral, like we had a tip, we got it in the Sun, but people wouldn't have known he was there. He hadn't told people he was coming over. There is potential that he could be coming over. We don't know. He could be coming over more.
But, you know, for example, that one thing about bodyguards coming over, Ken, when he came over for the court cases, he didn't have Scotland Yard protection. He had his own protection officer with him, the one he pays for. So, you know, there is an issue, and that's
there is an issue. I mean, when he came over...
I think they should be doing it, the full package of protection, because the fallout will be... There'll be so... I mean, the Home Secretaries would have... I mean, can you imagine the fallout if something happened to him? Over what? Over having 2 protection officers with him for a period of 3 or 4 days? really, I think most taxpayers would agree he should be protected.
But nobody wants any harm to come to Harry, and although there's lots of vitriol and people criticising for what he does,
if it did happen, who would be cold?
The royal household, the security services, the police, I trust them to know if there is a risk against Harry, and I think if he does come over, and they would assess it and decide whether he needs protection or not.
Well, with respect, and as a friend, I value a lot of what you say, particularly within your knowledge of royalty, etc. But one thing I would say that I probably have better knowledge than you on is this question.
Let me finish. I agree with you, but that's why.
No, listen, Bob. What I'm saying is that Harry, with his wife or his children, if that was a decision made, and it would have to be with the approval of the King and the Queen, be rest assured that the British government, in close concentration and with the Metropolitan Police, would make sure make sure that they would receive together the right protection.
That's exactly the point. That is why she's not travelling. No, it's not an end of story.
But it is. I'm just told you what it is.
No, but the fact is, he believes that if he brings his wife with him, she will not be afforded the protection that he feels is necessary.
That's what he believes. I'm not saying that.
But you're saying it's got to be put to the test. What? Leave her exposed? The reality is he doesn't believe that is what he's going to get, and that's why he's taking the court case.
All right. Let's see. The court case, I think, is going to rumble on till next year, I think. We're expecting it in spring next year, and there's lots of appeals and coming back and forth. Where do Harry and Meghan go from here? If they're falling out with Hollywood, if they're losing friends, and even friends in the media, US publications are turning on them. Like the original report, Hollywood Reporter was saying that Hollywood is turning its back on them. Where do they go from here if they lose friends, if they run out of friends or run out of contacts in California?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you just quote two publications there, Matt, the Beast and Us. Actually seemed to me to be a draw, actually, that one's saying something good about her, the other saying something bad about her, and then people coming out of both sides saying, well, she's good, this, one. I quite frankly, I don't know. Because that's not really my side of things. But look, I witnessed such fallout within our own royal family during the Diana days, with people saying things in the office and reports leaking into newspapers and magazines. So this is just a continuum of what happens, because it's good copy because of who they are. But to answer your story about what do they do, as I said to you, my own view is that whether they ran out of friends or things to do in America, which, hang on a minute, it can't be that bad living in the size mansion they do, and they've still got quite a bit of cash to make life worth living. So it isn't that bad a story. So I haven't got a great deal of sympathy for them. But I do appreciate that he, as I said to you, a prince of the realm, and up and just prior to Megxit rather, he was more popular than the Queen. So, this guy is quite important. He has a personality, he has a style that's so unique that quite frankly, he thought he could do 6 months in and 6 months out. It hasn't worked out like that because the Queen wouldn't allow that. But he's still got something to offer. It's a question of how he puts it together with his wife and family to see if he can achieve some sort of comeback. Let's look at the King and Queen at the moment, both now in their late 70s. William and Kate seem not to be at it at the moment for probably good reason. So is there a slot for him? I don't know.
No.
I think we've got to wait and see what happens, because the answer is, I don't know. But going back to these fallouts within their household, as I said, this happens. It happens in any big unit. Particularly it happened in my time with the Prince of Wales' office and the Prince's office as it was then. So I don't see anything unusual about that, where people making statements to the media, what some good, some bad.
When you worked, or when you're in Kensington Palace, or when you worked with Princess Diana, what was the kind of atmosphere because there was a War of the Waleses at that stage as well, wasn't there? What was the atmosphere working with Diana when she was seeing critical stories in the newspaper, then positive stories in the newspaper? Because look, Harry is Diana's son, so he's going to have certain traits that his mother had. How did she react to both negative and positive press?
Well, I mean, during the mid-'80s, I mean, the press coverage of Diana was highly positive. It was only when the media got wind of the real story surrounding her and the introduction of Camilla, etc., that the storyline changed. So there was a lot of truth, a lot of untruth in that. Diana dealt with that remarkably well. I have to say that, given the unhappiness of her marriage at that time, to perform on a daily basis with the public was not easy. And so, yeah, she did deal with it. And I think, that's part of being royal. the royal family themselves have had to do this with all the accusations, particularly with the late Duke of Edinburgh, etc., and even the King himself now. I think they're very good at adapting to it, dealing with it and moving on. And I think Harry has to do the same, and he will do. There's no question of that.
Do you see talk about? I just mentioned there. Obviously, Harry is Diana's son. They must have certain traits. Do you see many similarities between Prince Harry and Princess Diana from when you knew her?
Do I see any similarities? I think, yes, they're both entertainers. Harry was always the court jester as a child.
Right.
I mean, part of the problem with him and his brother was that William was somewhat jealous of his popularity. But like his mother, she liked to be entertained. She liked to be popular. I think this is what Harry, he was popular, certainly when he was here in the United Kingdom. And I think he still is now in America. For the negativeness that's come out of these last 2 articles, people will say that he's actually very fun to be with. He's very good in meetings. He's always mindful and careful of how he speaks to his staff, etc. But which was a classic Diana. She was very generous. She was a gift-giving. I mean, Harry's exactly the same. This is how the Spencers, I think, operated. But I do see similarities. I do see similarities.
Yeah, you mentioned the Spencers there, because obviously Harry spent a lot of time when he was over last. He was with Earl Spencer. Is that side of the family that he might start leaning on now, the Spencers?
Well, it was quite interesting, wasn't it, that he spent time with Earl Spencer, but that would be expected. We saw William, didn't we, when Lady Sarah McCorkindale was at that engagement alongside him at Cranwell a few days later. I think you were there. So I think the Spencers throughout history have always played both sides off against the middle when it comes to the crown.
Well, I mean, I think that, for me, I'll never forget Spencer's eulogy at Diana's funeral. I mean, that was barbed in so many ways. The Spencers, they're quite a close unit, despite, their history. But Charles Spencer, who, I have quite a lot of time for, and I think it was always going to be his responsibility that he would look after, William and Harry wherever he could. And I think the move in recently of Harry's meeting with him was symptomatic of what he would want. Yeah, at least he has a bolt hole there. But I think, yeah, there are similarities, definitely.
Look, I'm going to have to start on the horrendous stories or this horrendous documentary about Mohamed Al-Fayed. I think there's accusations of him sexually abusing and raping women while he was at Harrods. But this is a man who ingratiated himself or attempted to ingratiate himself into the royal family. Ken, as protection officer for Princess Diana, you must have had quite a few run-ins with Mohamed Al-Fayed. What did you meet him many times? Did he try to, let's say, ingratiate himself into Diana? Well, he ultimately did, because he introduced Diana to his son Dodi.
I mean, first and foremost, I mean, we have to await now this inquiry, which is tragic. It really is that is now taking place. I mean, I have no comment to make about that. But from working with Diana, yes, I did meet Mr. Fayed on a number of occasions. I mean, firstly, Diana would shop at Harrods. That was one of her favourite haunts before going down to San Lorenzo's in Beecham Place. And interesting enough, we always had a bit of fun with this because, we would go in door 10, which is the side of Harrods, and we'd say to each other, how long do you think it will be before Mohammed turns up with his entourage? I always say normally between 4 to 5 minutes. Diana said a bit longer than that. But I always won. It was always between 4 and 5 minutes. And suddenly you're going through door 10, and then walking around the food hall, you'd hear this, and there's this wedge would appear by the cheese counter. And there in the middle of the security officers will be Mohammed, and then behind, bringing up the rear guard, will be his PA, Michael Cole. And then, of course, we had to make a sort of escape as soon as possible. But he wanted this contact with royalty, because let's not forget, 2 attempts of him failing to achieve or to get British citizenship. He had to find another way, because that was, if you like, what he wanted in life. He had everything else in his life, but he didn't have this British citizenship. He didn't have a British passport. And he thought by ingratiating himself with members of the royal family would be a way of securing that. Thankfully, that didn't happen.
Well, that was before Dodi, wasn't it? That was attempts back.
Well, this was way before Dodi, in the mid-80s. And of course, what he used to do, and I would send the green van up to Kensington Palace laden with goods from clothes through to food. And Diana was quite shrewd here in the sense that, look, I can't keep taking this van load of, unsolicited goods. And in the end, I had to tell the driver, look, it's got to end. And then, the last attempt when he'd send, I think his name was Henry, the doorman, would waddle his way up to Kensington Palace in his green livery coat and cap with smaller items. In the end, we managed to persuade him that you can no longer, sort of drop these things off. So, this was the beginning of it in the 80s with Fayed. And, it was difficult for Diana. And the last thing I would say is this, that in the late 80s, Diana said to me, she said, I've got a great trip for you, Ken. I said, oh, what's that? She said, oh, well, you can go and recce a place for me in France. So I said, well, who's that? She said, well, Mr. Fayed's offered his villa in the south of France. And I said, well, ma'am, I said, you can't do this. And she said, why? And I explained at some length sort of why she couldn't do that, because at that time she was still married to the Prince of Wales. The Queen was obviously still alive. And to have accepted that at a time when, the British government, were not happy with Fayed at all. And so this would have been really bad a move on Diana's part. She listened and thankfully, said to me the following morning, OK, I see your point of view, we won't do it. But you see, even at that time in the 80s, Fayed himself was trying desperately to ingratiate himself with the royal family because he honestly believed that if he could win that side of his game, then, he couldn't see any reason why he wouldn't be given British citizenship.
It was interesting you talk about that attempt there by Al-Fayed to get Diana, because she did end up going to south of France, many years later. And I've been reading your book that you both put together, Diana, Closely Guarded Secrets, very good. But in there, you don't pull punches about Al-Fayed and what happened in Paris. There's a quote here. My department had care of her, Diana, for some 15 years. Mohamed Fayed's team of bodyguard had charge of her security for 8 weeks, and then she died. I mean, he's not a man that all these horrendous things that have come out about him, he's not a man that you ever particularly liked or respected, particularly after the death of Diana. No,
I think the most important point here is that what's come out recently in the wake of these allegations about Fayed and his his pursuit of the staff, etc., was that the fear that he inherited in his staff and this controlling attitude. And for me, this is exactly what happened in Paris in 1997. Right. I mean, Fayed himself, was controlling this whole affair, this whole movement of Diana and his son Dodi from his office in Park Lane. Now, you can't control a protection operation when you're not in the country. And the point was that I have some sympathy here for people like Rhys-Jones and Wingfield and others in the security team, because they were fearful of actually saying what they think should happen if that in any way sort of went against what Fayed wanted or even what Dodi wanted. So although I've been very critical of that operation in Paris with some justification, the reason why that happened, it wasn't because of, it was because of Rhys-Jones and his security team, but they were so fearful of what Fayed would say if they for once recommended something that he disagreed with. And the one thing that they should have done, which they didn't do, was actually remove Henri Paul from the driving seat, because he was the cause of the accident. But they couldn't do that. Henri Paul had been a key member of the Fayed dynasty for 15, 16 years. He was much higher up that rung of authority than either Rhys-Jones or Wingfield. And so for that reason, had they had taken him out of that driving seat, that accident would not have happened. But it was the fear and the control that Fayed, pervaded over these people, which he's done, sadly, with his employers over many, many years.
Rob, I mean, this isn't the first time that unsavoury characters try to ingratiate themselves with the royal family. I mean, Prince Andrew and Epstein, for instance. Did you have any run-ins with Fayed?
Not run-ins. I met him a few times. I mean, the reality is these claims, if proven to be true, are absolutely horrendous, and there's obviously a lot of them, and the investigation was very thorough, but we have to wait and see what comes out. I mean, whenever I met him, actually, he was fairly personable, quite funny, but I think we have to be careful in terms of a lot of these allegations, because of course they're made about a man that's dead, and it never surfaced properly until after his death. That said, he wielded ran Harrods as if it was like Napoleon. He was in charge of the place, and there were a lot of people that were in fear of him or and worried about their careers. So that's all involved. But yeah, I met him a few times. I met him when I was after Diana's tragic death. That he would be. I was on the Daily Express, and if you remember at the time, the Daily Express were before I left, we kept writing stories. Well, long after I left, about really were being fed by Fayed about the whole conspiracy theory. And I remember going along to his office in Harrods, and he presented me with all this evidence, which some of it was not evidence because there were affidavits that were unsigned, and it was a bit of a mess, actually. And I just thought, and I would point that out and say, we can't possibly run this. Got him. I mean, he used to give you a load of goodies. You were talking about the goodie bags he would give. He would present all these things, including ties, which were clip-on ties. He said, well, you can't wear a full tie because the security services will come behind you and try to strangle you. So he was very, very obsessed with all of that stuff, almost to the point of slightly paranoid about the security services and the establishment.
Well, he believed, he peddled that conspiracy theory, didn't he, that Diana's death was caused by the establishment of CIA and MI5.
Yeah, but he did all of that. We had to sit and listen to all this. I mean, this is one of the reasons I left the Express. We were going to write the book together. I looked at it, and he was giving evidence about the guy who made the ring, saying that it was an engagement ring for Diana, and it wasn't signed. And all these things, he had affidavits and evidence of the bloods on Henri Paul, which proved he wasn't drunk. But he did, he was, and so there was an awful lot going on. But the one thing I would think is that at that time, he was grieving for his own son, and also think he must have had some advice that, given that Diana was being driven by one of his employees in a car that he owned, that he may well have been culpable in many ways for her death, and was trying his best to avoid that being thrown at him. But he was a man in grief as well because he lost his son, so you have to bear that in mind.
Yeah, but I think on that was that. The death of his son, certainly, and the death of Diana and Henri Paul, I mean, that is regrettable. But the reason, in my view, that for his litany of crazy accusations, particularly against the late Duke of Edinburgh, of his involvement and those spurious allegations, was he was a man that actually began to realise, hang on, this is my fault. I got to dig myself out of this because, if I'm found in any way to be responsible for this, where does that put me? So you had this charade of nonsense that nobody, even
you gave evidence,
even the coroner, the coroner at the inquest said that this doesn't stand up. There is not one single shred of evidence to support any of these allegations. But
they went on for 10 years or so. There were front pages. It was almost like the princess had not actually died. She was on the front page so often.
I think after the inquest, he may have finally kind of given up the idea of these conspiracy theories. But let's see how that goes.
But they went, they were like, not only was there Lord Stevens' investigation, there was the investigation, and then there was Paris, and then eventually, I think that the inquest in London, which Ken gave evidence, was the thing that finally made him look. Yeah. Well, actually, in all honesty, it did give some culpability to the photographers that were chasing. So, therefore, it was different in that respect.
All right. Is it too early to start talking about Christmas? We're only in September at the moment.
Well, Royal Christmas.
Royal Christmas.
It's inevitable, isn't it? Because we always get it. What are they going to be eating? How do they do that? Well, under the tree. Every year it comes around.
This week.
Is there a boar on the a boar on the sideboard, as Mervyn would say? All sorts of.
This week, Princess of Wales held her first meeting. We're told, her second meeting of the year. It appeared in the court circular. It was to do with her Christmas Carol concert. Did you watch the Christmas Carol concert in previous years? So she's coming. So she's held her first meeting, and we're hoping that we will see her on filming in December, and it will be screened on Christmas Eve. We haven't seen much of her. I mean, is this welcome news, Rob, that she's actually holding these meetings to hold?
I think this is more to do with the way that the PR department are trying to handle the absence of Catherine. An totally justifiable and understandable absence. But obviously they're trying to show the world that, whilst they're not seeing photographs of her, while they're not seeing pictures of her engagements, she's active and she's doing the duties, and that's why they're highlighting these things in the court circuit. I must admit, 35 years covering the royal family, it's the first time I've ever had press officers saying, "Oh, take a quick look at the court circular," as if it's going to be the lead news item. So, look, I think it's surprising if you put in all the meetings that the King had when he was Prince of Wales. I mean, it'll just take up too much time. And I think if you did that for every single member of the royal family, it would look a bit odd. I think they're doing it for Catherine because it's just to show the world that she's, she's back doing work.
Well, they had to, because when she put that video out that suggested that said that the treatment was over, they told us that she would start holding meetings and would start appearing in the court circular. So this is what she said. She said she will go back to work, but she's not being seen in public yet. She's not actually doing any kind of public things. But I'm looking forward to the Christmas thing, and it's a good event. It's a really good event. You have royals there, you have celebrities there, you have the Princess of Wales. She played piano there with Tom Walker, I think, in the first year. It's an annual bonanza now.
Yeah, she definitely will be involved in doing that, and that's because it's become a part of the. It's going to be part of the Christmas calendar, and her involvement in the Christmas calendar going forward. You see all the younger members and the cousins, etc., at the event, and it becomes something just in the run-up in the media calendar. So, yeah, she'll definitely be involved.
Okay, lovely. All right, guys. We've got time for our quick-fire, in your opinion, questions, if you are ready for them. Ken, I'm going to start with you. So, obviously, amid the Harry and Meghan bad boss row, as it's written here, who do you believe would be the best member of the royal family to work for? Because remember, you did work for some, so who would be the best currently?
For me, at the moment now, I'd go for the King. Okay. I tell you why, I'm completely on the opposite side when I was working with Diana. But what I would say is that he understood the difficulties of staff on both sides, because the staff knew of their marital problems. But, that was their problem. But he was very sensitive and very generous. And I always remember at Highgrove, that he would make available, all the food that their chefs cooked, the accommodation, etc. So we were indeed privileged for that. Plus, he has a sense of humour, and I always like that. I must just say, one story that I remember above all working with him was late one night after he'd been to the opera at Covent Garden, he went privately to the National Gallery. And so we'd be taken in via the Sainsbury wing. And, of course, there he is, dressed immaculately in black tie. And there stood at the entrance of this Sainsbury wing is this poor commissioner in his late 70s, shabbily dressed with a pair of boots about 2 sizes too big, a collar that was 3 sizes too big, in complete contrast to this well-dressed entourage. And as he came in, the commissioner came and said, "Good evening, sir." And the prince said, "Oh," he said, "have you been here long?" He said, "7.5 years, sir." He said, "Oh," he said, "it's an awful long time to wait for me." But that sort of, sense of humour would be why. If I had that opportunity, I would love to work with him.
I think you should go and get for Harry and Meghan. I mean, that would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I'd say that's a second choice.
Yeah. I mean, they give you a bit of a,
Rob, to
bonus.
Exactly.
Who would you least like to work for in the royal family?
What, the working members of the royal family now? Or
yeah.
At least. I don't know, I think they'd all be, in what way, I suppose? Well, I think they're all pretty good. I suppose Prince Andrew's no longer on the thing.
Still royal, though.
Yeah, who would I least like to? No, I think they're all quite decent people to work for. I don't think there'd be anything to worry about really there. I think maybe Prince William, I don't know.
Sounds like you're haggling for a job now, Rob.
No, I don't. I'm very happy just writing about them and covering the stories. As you are, Matt. I don't, unless you're going to be the new director of public affairs.
Would you imagine that, having us in that post? Have you both seen the Amazon show, A Very Royal Scandal?
I have, yes.
It's very good. So
I watched both, actually. I thought the three-parter was,
it's really good.
Was excellent.
This is the Amazon one, the Netflix one earlier this year.
Is it Michael Sheen?
Yeah, it's very
I thought it was excellent, actually, yeah.
So if you were able to do an on-camera interview with any member of the royal family, who would it be and why?
For me, it would be the Duke of Kent.
Okay.
I tell you why. I had the privilege of working with him for three and a half years. And I would love to ask him, because for 3 consecutive Christmases, he gave me a travelling clock in a leather case. So I collected 3 clocks in a leather case. I'd love to ask him why did he give me the same clock every Christmas? I think I know, actually.
He had a job lot.
But he had a job lot of 30 clocks the first year I worked for him. And he had this wonderful phrase. I used to say, I said to him when we returned back at Wren House at Kensington Palace, I said, what are you going to do with those clocks, sir? He said, don't worry. He said, they make marvellous Christmas presents. And that's why I was in receipt of 3 of them. But he was I
did interview him once when we went. You and I went to South Africa. And one of the questions I asked the Duke was, because, you know, he's the most senior Freemason and all these things. But I said, well, how long do you see yourself doing this job? And he was sitting in the front of that van we're in, going on the way to Rorke's Drift or wherever it was. He said, I really have no idea, which was quite funny. But the person I have interviewed, Julian Payne would say I didn't interview the King, but I had a conversation with the King when he was Prince of Wales for 25 minutes from the plane coming back to Australia. And I would say he's probably, given who he is, what he's seen, what he's been through, I would say he's the most interesting member of the royal family to interview. I really would like to sit down on television and ask him a few questions. Other than that, obviously, after what she's been through, Catherine would be a great interview.
Well, yeah, she's not done many.
I'd like to probably, she has done interviews, but they're sort of interviews, but they've done a few for the television. She had that podcast. But I think if she would sit down and do a very frank chat, I think that would be fantastic.
Does she need to do one, you know, once she's ultimately cancer-free? I mean, we think, but she'll carry on till the end of the year doing bits and bobs as we were talking about the Christmas Carol concert, and maybe in the new year we'll kind of see more of her. Do you think she needs to do a sit-down interview?
I think if she's going to do anything further, I thought the film, although it was maybe a little long, was excellent. The reason it was probably long was to include the children and to show the public the children and get the media, give them give them what they want. But actually, I think the sit-down interview with a sympathetic interview, but to sit down with a journalist would be very good. I don't think they're going to do that. I think the way they will play this, William and Catherine going forward, is in these presentations that they do, because they have control and there's no left field questions. But then it loses something when it's like that. I mean, you know, you need that sense that they're being asked questions by a journalist or an interviewer rather than presenting your package. I think it's better, and the public get more out of it.
Yeah. Ken, which 4 members of the royal family would you invite to a dinner party, and why?
I thought about this.
Yeah.
The 4 members that I'd have would
living
be...
as well. Or...
Oh, no, you can past members.
Well, what they would be, for me, would be Prince Andrew, Fergie, and his 2 daughters. For this reason.
Wow.
They'd arrive at your house, right? They'd be critical of everything that you had in the house and on the table. They'd be arguing, and they'd try and convince me that they were the answer to the future of the British monarchy. So I'd say nothing. So that's why you'd have
harsh about Beatrice and Eugenie.
No. You asked me. That would be my guess.
That'd be fun. Rob?
Past and present. Well, I would if it's past members, I would have Edward and Mrs. Simpson. I think that would be fascinating to sit down and hear what they had to say. The Queen Mother at the same table would be interesting, and the Queen, late Queen.
All right. Lovely. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode.